Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm very excited today to announce Headstamp Publishing's fourth book. This is entitled Swords of the Emperor. It is a collector's identification guide to Japanese military swords, 1873 to 1945, and it is written by John E. Plimpton. Now, who on earth would care about this? Well, really, there's a lot of fantastically interesting detail to this period in Japanese history. Everyone's, of course, aware of the classic katanas, but during this period, starting in the mid-1800s, Japan opens itself to the West, and it begins to modernize, it does truly modernize its military. And one of the steps that's involved in that is a very deliberate look to major Western European powers to emulate as role models. And this early on involved the French. After the Franco-Prussian War, it transitioned a bit more to the Germans. But the Japanese are not just emulating things like uniforms and tactics and drill, they're also emulating things like swords. And so the katana form, it disappears in favor of swords that look like European styles. But these are swords that are truly hybrids. They're a European style, but made with Japanese craftsmanship and Japanese decoration and great many Japanese cultural elements that go into the fittings on these swords. I should point out, of course, there's a katana-looking thing up here. In the 1930s, there is a wave of nationalism that comes back through Japan, and they transition actually back from the European-style blades to a katana-style blade in the 1930s, or several different models of them. Those are, of course, also covered in this book. Now, to go into a little more detail, the book is more than 600 pages long. It has more than 2,000 beautiful original photographs, a fantastic layout. The book is well organized, it's clear, it's easy to read through, and it is truly a magnificent resource for anyone who is interested in the development of these swords, identification of them. To the layman, a lot of these swords look very, very similar, just like with many military firearms. But once you look at them in context and compared to each other, the patterns start to emerge. So the way that the book is divided up is first, each chapter is devoted to a specific service branch. So the major two, of course, are the Army and the Navy. That's where most resources on this subject end. Plimpton's book, Swords of the Emperor, includes many more. We have civilian court swords, diplomatic swords, swords for the firefighters, for police, for a wide variety of other institutions. Those are also covered here. Within each chapter, the relevant swords are then divided out by year type. There are a sequence of different design patterns. Of course, every military goes through this with all of their equipment. They adopt one style, they use it for a while, and then they adopt something new for a different purpose. Within each model of sword, for example, the Army pattern of 1886, there are then going to be different grades produced for different levels of officer. Everything from the lowest NCO up to the highest generals. And these swords maintain the same basic construction pattern, but they change in decoration in very specific and understandable ways. And that's one of the fantastic things that this book allows one to understand, is how those changes happen, what decorations, what specific criteria are associated with which specific levels of each particular sword. Now, I should point out, the book is primarily a catalog of all of these different models and grades of sword, more than 200 in total. The book is taken primarily from John Plimpton's collection. He is widely acknowledged to have probably the second best collection of these swords in the United States. It is a nearly encyclopedic collection with examples of virtually every single pattern and grade. He's been collecting these swords since the 1970s. He is a member of a number of major Japanese sword collecting societies, truly an expert in the field. At any rate, while the book is primarily a catalog of these swords, there is also a bunch of contextual information that's included. So not just discussion of individual grades, what was a particular grade intended for, what's the significance of different elements in different grades, but also contextual information on police use of swords, like why did the firefighters have swords, and a lot of Japanese history that is integral to the use of these swords. There's a really cool selection of original artwork included in the book as well, both paintings and photography showing these swords in context. We have some maps showing the breakup of Japan, where different things were made or used, as well as the Japanese Empire in its entirety at its height in the 1930s. There's a series of appendices with a bunch of really good background information as well, discussions of the different colors that were used in relation or in recognition of different branches of service, more information on different officer grades, explanations of the meaning of sword tassels, symbols that are found on swords, a tremendous amount of sort of ancillary background important information on the subject. I really have no doubt that this book will become the de facto standard reference guide for swords of this period. It's a beautiful book to look at, and it is absolutely chock full of great information. We're releasing this book a little bit differently than we have done previous Headstamp titles. We are not putting this up on Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding platform to pre-launch. Instead, we're releasing it directly to our own website, headstamppublishing.com. In addition, we're only launching a single version of the book. It is simply the book, as you've been seeing here in this video. We don't have a collector edition or a signature edition of it, and we also don't have any ancillary extra materials like bookmarks or posters to go along with it. We're simply doing the book, and we're doing that largely to ease the logistical process. Now, we have the pre-sale is going to run for 2 weeks approximately until the end of April, and we're going to use pre-orders during that time for 2 things. One is to help us determine what the demand is for the book and how many copies we should print, and the other is to help raise the funds to initially pay for the printing. Now, we are choosing to print this book in the United States instead of China, where we've done most of our previous titles, for a couple of reasons. First off, this book talks about the Japanese Empire in the 1930s, and that includes an awful lot of Japanese soldiers in China. This is material that is sensitive in China and would absolutely be subject to Chinese government censorship, and we're not willing to change the content of this book to appease them. That means we can't print it in mainland China. Having looked at a wide variety of other options, we've settled on the United States for this particular book, and there are pros and cons to that. So the good side is, of course, we can print whatever we want without any modifications to our author's manuscript. It also means that we don't have the travel delay of shipping books in bulk by ship, which can take a month or 2. So that should speed up the process. The downside is printing in America is substantially more expensive than printing in China. As a result, our price for this book is substantially higher. Our retail list price is going to be $130. For the 2 weeks of the pre-sale campaign, we're offering it to you guys for $120. And that price increase is entirely, in fact, it's not, it doesn't fully make up for the increase in cost of printing in the US. We're eating some of that, but we have to increase the price if we're going to print here in the US. I know a lot of people have expressed a desire to have books printed in the US. We're doing it on this one. Now, one of the other downsides is just because it's in the US doesn't mean that everything's going to go hunky-dory. We actually, at the current time, have significant paper shortages in the United States. Talking to our printer, the paper mill that they use, the best option that they have, is a mill that is taking orders and delivering 4 to 5 months after orders. So the time frame for this book is going to be 6 to 8 months from the end of April to actually having books available to deliver. And we can't even guarantee that. That's assuming 4 to 5 months of delay just for the paper to arrive. That's an issue that they don't have in China, but there are other problems with China. So everything here is a balancing act. Now, one of the pieces of good news here is this manuscript is completely finished and done. All the editing is done, all the photo editing is done, all the layout is done. The book is quite literally ready to go. And the only thing that we need to know is how many copies to order. So at the end of April, we will be placing the order for the book, and it will immediately move forward to the printer. So at that point, it's going to depend on paper delivery times, maybe. If things smooth out in the general supply chain, that can happen quicker than 4 to 5 months. It might take longer. That part's going to be out of our control. So those are the pros and cons of the decision here to print this book in the United States. We want to be very upfront with you guys about what to expect and how we are doing this one. I'm really excited about the book, having it out there. This is a project that we've been working on for a couple of years now, and we're all at Headstamp. Nick, James, Justin, myself, we're all extremely excited to see this project go to print. I know the author, Mr. Plimpton, is very excited to see his book get out into the marketplace as well. So if you think this is as interesting of a subject as I do, if you like the look of Headstamp books, I would encourage you to head over to headstampublishing.com. There's a link in the description text below. You can pre-order your copy today, and we're excited to have another book out to offer to you. Thank you very much for watching.